I it's so okay. It's interesting that I decided to do this lecture at this point, and the person whose book I was looking at to talk about the Daniels is unexpectedly the person who I look up to the most in terms of art history in India, and somebody who passed away yesterday. So I'm going to start with talking a little bit about BN Goswamy. Now, BN Goswamy, Brajendra Nath Goswamy, born in 1933, decided to give up being an IAS officer to become to go back and become a lecturer. To become a history lecturer, he first decided he wanted to do art history, and studied to do his doctorate, became essentially the first art historian in India. I mean, we had foreigners who were coming in and talking about art history, but BN Goswamy became the first person who was talking about, as an Indian, decided to lecture on art history. And what he decided to do was, he happened to be up in the hills where he saw a series of books, and books lying with the Brahmins out there, and thought of asking at that point, are there any artists that these pandas, these people who keep these books, know, whether any artists were included in these pandas as well? And these guys looked through the trunks and trunks of these histories they had of every family in the hills. So BNG decided to look through this history of people in the hills, and found the story of, he started with finding the story of one person who turned out to be an artist. I mean, the history of that person. And that was a painter from Guler called Nensuk, who had worked in a kingdom called Guler. And so he started writing out the story of Nensuk, finding first the history of Nensuk. And from the history of Nensuk, he started finding the paintings that were associated with the timings of Nensuk, etc. And from that, he managed to find paintings which had no information written on them. I mean, in India, we don't have a history of naming names of painters on paintings. But BNG managed, from 18th century paintings, which had no names written on it, to find out which paintings were done by one particular artist. And from that, he then proceeded to find other artists, including my favorite, who is this first painter, Nensuk's brother Manaku, their father, Pandit Siuram, their entire family, the family of Nensuk. And this became the first time that anyone had looked at the painters in Indian painting. Not the patrons, not the rajas, not the kingdoms, but the painters of Indian paintings. And he then continued from there to look at Indian painting in various ways. So he looked at Sikh painting, he looked at manuscripts, he looked at Kashmiri paintings, he looked at Mughal paintings, of course, that goes without saying, Rajput painting, the history of paintings. He also did various other things which became very interesting over time, including he looked at Shakti Burman, he introduced me to Hashyas or the borders. And funnily enough, as I started out by saying, BNG, he took that eye and brought it also to the Daniels, to Thomas and William Daniels, who are, again, 17th century painters, but from England, who'd come down to India. So they were compatriots of these other Indian painters we were studying, but they were not something that Indians had ever looked at. And as I said, I was looking at this book by BNG yesterday in the library, and to find out this morning that BNG had passed away was quite a shock. So taking from BNG's reading, I'm going to talk a little bit about Thomas and William Daniels. And this is something that I've been wanting to do for a little while, because Thomas and William Daniels are very important to Indian art, not just to colonial art, not just to British art, but they're important to Indian art, and that's why I really want to talk about them. In fact, anytime I do a walkthrough of the National Gallery of Modern Art, I will always start with Thomas and William Daniels' paintings, because they give a very interesting perspective to the way the British were looking at India. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a little bit about who these two gentlemen were, why are they important, why, and you will be seeing on your screen some of the most beautiful paintings there are. There's no doubt about it. I mean, the detail is exquisite, and at a time when photography had already been introduced, these painters were still painting. They were using cameras obscuras, but they were actually making paintings, and yet their paintings were so precise, so architecturally perfect, that they could have, they even today are better than any photograph of that era. You're going to have to excuse me, I've got a little bit of a cold, but as I said, VNG, it came together, it was really important. Okay, so Thomas Daniell was the uncle of William Daniell, and Thomas was born in 1749 in a small village called Kingston upon Thames, and his father was the landlord of a pub, of an inn called Swan's Inn in Chertsey in Surrey, and small boy, small village, etc. By 1763, he began working as a bricklayer, but then he got apprenticed to a coach builder from whom he learned the elementary skills of painting. That is a picture of Thomas Daniell. This is nephew William Daniels. Okay, by 1770, he had become the assistant to a gentleman who was a coach painter for the king, and this inspired him to become an artist. And between 1772 and 84, he exhibited about some 30 paintings in the Royal Academy of Arts, but nothing special. I mean, he made no name for himself. This was the time of Constable and Turner, these really famous artists in England. He was neither making a name nor was he making money out of it. By 1779, his brother passed away and left behind 5 children. And Thomas Daniell decides to adopt one of them, who is named William, who is then 10 years old. And this is in 1779. In 1784, he asked to come down to India. He asked the East India Company whether he can come down, and he'd also started working on engravings and aquatints and stuff like that. So he named William as his assistant, and 1784 they receive permission, 1785 they leave, 1786 they arrive in Calcutta. Now the point was, and I'm breaking the story up a little bit here, in 1784 the Pitts Act had been introduced, by which the British government now shared power with the East India Company in India, and they had political oversight in India. So in other words, the British government had just taken over in 1784 in India, and this was a time when the people in England were very interested in what was happening in India. I mean, they suddenly owned this place, they wanted to know what it looked like, they'd heard about it being this fabled rich land, and it was. At that time, it was far, far richer than England was. So what Thomas and William Daniell did was decide to show people in England a view of India. But the view they decided to show in India, of India, was a very beautiful perspective, no doubt about that, very architecturally beautiful, very historically beautiful. In fact, William Daniell, who kept the diary, he's written about how there was a previous painter called William Hodges and how he didn't feel William Hodges was accurate enough, and he and Thomas Daniell prided themselves on their accuracy. So they arrive in Calcutta in 1786 to 1788. They produce Views of Calcutta, a set of 12 aquatints, and they sell these aquatints, make some money, and then they decide to travel to other parts of India. So from there they travel to Delhi, Agra, UP. Sorry, that's the other way around. They go from Calcutta to UP, Kanpur, Agra, Delhi. Then they travel as part of this through the Himalayas, accompanied by 4 British soldiers and 50 sepoys. And they finally reach Garhwal and become the first Europeans to explore Garhwal. From there, they come back to Calcutta, and 1792, they embark on a trip of South India. Now, this was again really difficult because this was the time of the third Anglo-Maratha War. So there was war going on, Hodges, etc. had not managed to reach the south. They managed, putting together palkins and sipais, etc. They managed to go through South India and reached right across. I mean, they reached the ends of India, including Chennai, including Mahabalipuram, etc. And after that, this is in 1792. In 1793, they now go to West India, which is they reach Bombay and travel with an artist called James Whale. And also at some stage in this, they managed to reach Sri Lanka as well. So then they finally, in 1794, they return to England via China. And then at this point, they put these pictures that they've produced, they make them into aquatints, which are really difficult, which you have to drop acid into certain places, let it eat through, and develop those various colors. But they put together 24 of these in 2 sets, 2 volumes called Oriental Scenery. And these sold spectacularly in England. They made a ton of money, and later on they also so you had 2 volumes, then you had another volumes 3 to 6 are drawn and engraved by Thomas and William Daniell, and all these are priced at 220 guineas each. So not cheap, made a lot of money. But it was so difficult for them to do that Thomas Daniell finally had to take rest for about a few years. He then proceeded to become a Royal Academician and Secretary of the Royal Academy, and also worked for private collectors and sold paintings to many of the East India officials. And in 1803, he then produced what came to be known as Volume 4 of Hindu Excavations. Now, this looked at the Ellora caves. And they had actually never visited these caves, but these prints were based on drawings by James Whale, the person who had gone with them to Bombay. By 1810, they now traveled to China and produced another set of... sorry, I'm getting that a little mixed up. I'm a little sleepy at the moment. 1810, they produced a picturesque voyage to India by way of China, because they had come by way of China. And this is 50 colored aquatints depicting scenes and incidents encountered during their journey. Now, these, as I said, they were becoming more and more famous. They were selling in the Royal Academy. He was a secretary. By 1911, a Calcutta businessman called George Lyell exhibits 9 paintings of the Daniells at the Festival of Empire exhibition in London. And by 1923, the first account of the travels of Daniell is published in Bengal, past and present. Now, these are, you'll see a certain amount of paintings that BNG has shown, which show how what they look like. I mean, those tall stuff hats sitting out there trying to paint these places. That is Thomas Daniell sitting out there. Thomas Daniell finally died at around the age of about the age of 90, I think, and William Daniell lived a little. William Daniell died before him, actually, but you would have seen from these paintings which we've been going through that the beauty of these paintings is definitely in their amazing historical detail. Sorry, in their amazing architectural detail. Historically, they're perfect. They show the exact place. The first one that you were seeing up till now was Calcutta. This is now going onwards through UP, various places. They get through Kanpur, they get through Bihar, Kanpur. This is now, they get to Allahabad, these beautiful paintings of Khusro Bagh, etc., and of the fort of Allahabad, where Jahangir lived. This is Gaya, the sacred tree of Gaya in Patna. These amazing waterfalls that they show on the way. You can literally see the travels. This is now Banaras, where this is, I don't know why, sorry, BNG's come in the middle of this. So I think half of my little presentation has been cut. Okay. But as you saw through all those paintings, the beauty of those amazing paintings was their architectural beauty, but there is almost no historicity to these paintings. There are no people. If there are people, they are very typically Orientalist kinds of displays of people. There's the main painting which is in the National Gallery of Modern Art is of the Jama Masjid. Now it's Jama Masjid was made by Shah Jahan. It's barely 300 years, no, it's about 100 years after Shah Jahan has made the Jama Masjid. But they shown almost no people except one Hindu woman wearing a widow's sari and a little palkin. And at that time, by 1789, when this was done, there would have been a lot more people around. This was the main center of politics and schooling and intellectual activity in Delhi at that time, Shahjahanabad. So historical accuracy, maybe not so much. Definitely political accuracy was not there. There is even a comment that this gentleman leaves, William Daniell leaves in his book, where he writes, science has had her adventures, the Daniels wrote, and philanthropy her achievements. The shores of Asia have been invaded by a race of students with no rapacity but for lettered relics, by naturalists whose cruelty extends not to one human inhabitant, by philosophers ambitious only for the exploration of error and for the diffusion of truth. It remains for the artist to claim his place in these guiltless spoliations and to transport to Europe the picturesque beauties of these favored regions. Okay, saying that the British at this point, when they have just taken over India, when there are wars going on all around them, to say they have no rapacity but for lettered relics, and their cruelty extended not to one human inhabitant. These, BNG says, are statements subject to serious questioning. So the entire politics of what the Daniels were taking back with them to England, and what they were showing people back in England, was extremely fraught. It shows this whole view of a cleansed place where the people don't matter, the politics don't matter, what people are going through don't matter. What matters is that you're saying this is an uninhabited land of beauty which hasn't seen any people for thousands of years, and we are saving it, and we have no rapacity but for lettered relics. So this is both sides of the picture, as I said. Right now, going on in Art Mumbai is a beautiful, absolutely beautiful painting by Thomas William on Mahabalipuram. And must be seen because at this point, when Thomas and William Daniell reached Mahabalipuram, it was inhabited definitely, but it definitely wasn't on any map by anybody. It was one little place outside Chennai, outside Madras at that time, sorry, Fort St. George to be exact. And they were the first people who displayed Mahabalipuram in England. So this whole picture is amazing. There's no doubt about that. But when you look at it from both views. And when you're looking at it, think about the historians who have looked at it from an Indian point of view. The first historian who passed away today, and his book on the Daniels, and a secondary view of European art, which still allows us to accept the beauty of this art, but at the same time to look beyond it into to do a reading of that art in terms of what we're getting out of it. Okay, any questions, any comments, anyone wants to join? Very happy with all of that. It's very sweet of whoever's decided to stay on and attend this, and I hope I made a little bit of sense. Love questions. I know some of you, like Subha, have actually seen the painting. Jessel has definitely seen the painting. So any thoughts, any queries, love to talk about it. Okay, thanks so much. Any questions, you know where to find me, Subha. You of all people know where to find me. Thank you guys. Bye.